And now, live from Level 5 Productions on the island of Milleronia, it's The Larry Miller Show. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and everyone who's just in love with Dana Delaney. Hi, folks, and welcome back to the Larry Miller Show. I'm Larry Miller, but in a way, aren't we all? And boy, oh boy, was it beautiful here today at stately Miller Manor. We're on the mainland, and of course, we're here with Colonel Jeff and the doggies. And in our studio, boy, I'll tell you what, though, it was just gorgeous. I miss Milleronia whenever we're not on it. But after all, it's mine. But then made in my image. But you know what? It's great to be home on the mainland, and gee whiz, and that music, as you know, makes me so happy. And Colonel Jeff too. That's the John Carradine Orchestra and the Edna Mae Oliver Dancers, featuring boy tenor Don Riley, asking the musical question, "What do you tip a rarey?" Well, first of all, it's a pretty good question, Don. Smart and funny. And by the way, in case you don't know, and Colonel Jeff and I did not know, Tipperary is both a town and a county in Ireland. And the Colonel looked it up. And to be honest, well, it's a good question. Frankly, I'm guessing it's not the kind of place that looks kindly on cheap tippers. No, if you go to visit and hike and see relatives and you have a few at the local pub, and then you're going to go to a nice meal at a restaurant, if you don't tip at the pub, I don't think you're going to make it to the restaurant. I mean, a few of the local fellows might walk you to your cab, cosh you on the head, get in with you, and drive you a few kilometers out of town to dump you in a bog. And not a fast bog, not a slow bog, the kind that takes you straight down for 3,000 or 4,000 years and doesn't stop. You probably pass a lot of British soldiers still arguing about not tipping enough themselves. But, boy, good one, Don. And it's a great song, by the way. You know that one. It's a long way to Tipperary, such a long way to go. Come on, everyone. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Make sure you tip your waiter. Don't be such a hog. It's a long, long way to Tipperary. You'll end up in a bog. I mean, that's just a classic. You know what? I think that's from World War I days, actually. Terrific song and terrific question for Don Riley. And by PayPal. That's right, PayPal. One of the best groups, a great company. You know what? Boy, oh boy, if you work with PayPal, sometimes you feel like you're saving the world, and who knows, maybe you are. And to get there, by the way, let us take you. You can get there anyway. You can get to PayPal on any computer, any iPhone, anything you have. But why bother? What you do is go to our website. That's LarryMillerPodcast.com. Who's on the Mountain, Tom Mix? And as you can see, every church in England and one annoying guy is happy to hear me dedicate that to the great Tom Mix. Go there. Let us take you there. On our website, we have a banner that says, well, PayPal. And so you click that banner and then go take a nap on your lazy boy chair and put a magazine over your face and just relax for a while. And if you like my show, and why wouldn't you? And you'd like to contribute a little just to help out, and why wouldn't you? Go there and do it. Do all sorts of things with them. And thanks, folks. And that brings me to my favorite part of the show, the joke of the week. This is, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It's a real joy to move jokes along, to bring jokes back, to remember jokes, to see jokes written, to do something. It's like a great piece of music. And I've said this before, it's Schumann or Schubert or any of the great composers, and they just sometimes sit on a shelf. Well, take them down and play them. The same with good jokes. And Colonel Jeff and I like this one. It's there's a woman coming back from Ireland, and she's sitting on the plane next to a priest, an Irish priest. And he says to her, well, they smile at each other as they were flying, and he says, well, did you have a good trip? And she said, oh, Father, I had a wonderful trip. Yes, thank you for asking. And to be honest, I'm afraid I spent too much in the stores on gifts. And in fact, I got one for one of my cousins is getting married, and I got her, well, a nice hair dryer. I mean, a fancy one, and it's brand new in its box, and I'll have to pay customs, and I'm frankly worried about that. And in fact, since we're talking, may I ask you a favor? And the priest says, well, sure, tell me. And she says, well, just so I don't have to pay anything extra for it, it's $500, and would you mind just carrying it through customs just there, and you could put it under your robe, under your cassock there, and it would really help me out. And the priest looks at her and says, I'd be happy to, my dear, but remember, I won't lie. And she says, no, you won't have to lie. You have such a kind face. No one's going to stop you. And sure enough, he agrees, and they get there, and they get to customs, and she says to him, go ahead, you go first. And he does. He walks up there. And the customs official says to him, hello, Father, welcome to the United States, and do you have anything to declare? And the priest says, from the top of my head to my waist, I have absolutely nothing to declare. And the customs official thinks to himself, what is that? I've never heard something like that. What does that mean? And he looks at the priest and says, well, do you have anything below the waist to declare? And the priest says, I have a marvelous instrument designed to be used on a woman, but which is, to date, unused. That's pretty good, isn't it? And again, it's one of those great jokes of just, who writes these, when they come up? Someone wrote that initially, and it has to be a hairdryer, so I'm guessing it's after World War II days, of in the 50s or 60s or something like that. So that's a pretty good joke. And that's ours for the joke of the week. And that brings me to my second favorite part of the show, the Poetry Corner. Beautiful. That string quartet would have no problem getting through customs, by the way, assuming there are no hairdryers. But this is a lovely poem, folks. It's by the great William Blake, and I read you something of his last week as well. And what a guy, what a wordsmith. This one is called The Echoing Green by William Blake. The sun does arise and makes happy the skies. The merry bells ring to welcome the spring. The skylark and thrush, the birds of the bush, sing louder around to the bell's cheerful sound, while our sports shall be seen on the echoing green. Old John with white hair does laugh away care, sitting under the oak among the old folk. They laugh at our play, and soon they all say, such were the joys when we all girls and boys in our youth time were seen on the echoing green. till the little ones weary no more can be merry, the sun does descend, and our sports have an end. Round the laps of their mothers, many sisters and brothers, like birds in their nest, are ready for rest, and sport no more seen on the darkening green. Isn't that lovely? Boy, that William Blake, well, to say the least, knew his stuff. And that brings me to my third favorite part of the show, the magic movie moment. This is a terrific movie, and I've always loved it. And that's why I mentioned, by the way, John Carradine and Edna Mae Oliver up front, because, two wonderful actors. John Carradine has been in so many things, and he was a bad guy in this one. What a great actor. And he had a patch over his eye, and he played, this is from the Revolutionary War and our revolution. And he had that patch on and always had a stern look. He was a Tory, and he was looking to mess things up for all the Americans, all the patriots. And Edna Mae Oliver, what a great actress. You all know her, even if you don't know the name. She had that wonderful Boston voice of, "What are you doing? Barney, my husband Barney was, when he was here, he's away now. He's in heaven." But she's just terrific. And they're in this. It's called Drums Along the Mohawk from 1939, directed by John Ford. What a cast, starring Henry Fonda, Claudette Colbert, Edna Mae Oliver, Ward Bond, John Carradine, Mickey Shields. And by the way, see things by the great John Ford. If you haven't already, if you don't know, Orson Welles was once asked, the folks he thought were the best directors in the history of Hollywood, and he said John Ford, John Ford, and John Ford. And that was it was a beautiful thing to say, but it's true. Every movie was like a painting. And this one is in, as I mentioned, in our revolution. And a young couple, the Martins, Gil and Lana Martin, played by Henry Fonda and Claudette Colbert. Well, they just get married, and it's somewhere in, New England or New York, and they head in New York State, which wasn't a state at that time yet. They head up the Mohawk River, and there were parcels of land they could have, a shot at, that they could farm and make into a home. And after all, how hard could that be in 1776? And at any rate, it's a terrific movie. And, this magic movie moment, there's so many things I love about that movie. This magic movie moment is near the beginning, in the first 15 minutes or so of it. They have a battle. And this is the revolution. And Henry Fonda is fighting with the Patriots. And he's never done this before, but he's brave and tough. And he and his new wife, Lana, Claudette Colbert, stays at someone's house that they're using as a headquarters, and they all march off to fight the British and the Tories and the Indians. And at the end of that battle, they come, straggling back. They won, but what a cost. And Claudette comes out to greet him, sees Henry Fonda, and he's kind of straggling, and he looks a little dazed, but he did well, and he fought so well, and he's sitting on just on the porch, not a chair. She guides him to sit down there and lean against the house, and he says, there was a guy, and she's so happy to see him, and he says, the guy, and there was another one I shot of I don't know, I think maybe he was so young, maybe just a boy, and she's just crying, so happy that he made it back, because so many didn't. And one of their leaders in the battle, one of the Patriots' leaders, was a German general. As you know, there's a thing called the Stubende Parade, And Baron von Steuben was one of the Germans sent many folks over to help in our revolution. And this German general was wounded. His leg was nearly torn apart and nearly blown off, and it's got to be amputated. And they carry him into the house, and the doctor there is going to help. The doctor, remember, we didn't have much. That doctor was just a boy himself. He was in his early 20s, and he's going to help out, say, with the wounded. And of course, at first he goes over to the general and says, "General, I'm sorry, but I want you to know I've never done something like this. To amputate your leg." And the general just looks at him and with a small smile and says, "Oh, that's all right. A man has got to start somewhere." And that was such a charming thing to say. I thought, he's not being tough. He's not saying, "Well, it's all right, a man has got to start somewhere." And he's not being frightened, and he's not being meek. He's being, well, like your favorite uncle. And he says, "That's all right. A man has got to start somewhere." And he does. And remember, they had nothing. They didn't have, they didn't have an anesthetic. They didn't have anything in those days. But the doctor does his job, and he amputates the leg. And the general dies. We don't see that happen, but we're sad just to hear it a minute or two later. And, well, it reminds you folks that so many gave so much in so many great moments and causes, and especially the American Revolution. And, Drums Along the Mohawk is such a good movie, and I'd like to see it again myself. John Ford directed, starring Henry Fonda, Claudette Colbert, Edna Mae Oliver, Ward Bond, John Carradine, Mickey Shields, so many others. See it if you haven't seen it. If it's been a long time, see it again, and you'll be glad you did. And I'm going to be glad I did. We remember things that not only please us, that warm us, but I saw something so beautiful, and that's also why I mentioned Dana Delaney in the beginning. I was on The Tonight Show, and I was very lucky. They had me back a bunch of times. I think I was on 25 times. And this is with Johnny, by the way, with Johnny Carson. And I was on with Jay a lot, and I loved all of that. But this is one night I was on The Tonight Show, which taped recorded at about 5:15 or 5:30. I should know this, shouldn't I? And from NBC in Burbank, or as I think they used to call it, beautiful downtown Burbank. And this one night I'm in my dressing room, and one of my agents is there with me and someone else from his office, and in the dressing room, and I'm just standing in the doorway looking down the hall, and I'm right across the hall from the hair and makeup room. And I'm all done up, I'm all made up, and I've got my suit on, and I've got the shirt and tie and the shiny shoes and everything that you should put on. Hey, I'm going to be on The Tonight Show again, and I'm going to perform and then sit down and shake hands with Johnny. I mean, this is wonderful stuff, folks. And to be a comedian. And as I'm standing in the doorway, who walks up but Johnny Carson? He never does this. And I saw him, and I said, "Whoa, hi. Hi, Johnny." And he said, "Larry, good to see you." And he said, "I just wanted to come by and say hello." And we shook hands, and this was pretty great, folks. This is pretty exciting. And we're right there, and the two of us are standing in my doorway of the dressing room, and both my agents in the back there didn't come up and say, "Hi, how are you?" I mean, this is really something. And so we just we chatted for a minute, and he said, "I think it's going to be a good one tonight, and it's good to see you back here." And I said something like, I couldn't think of really anything to say, but I didn't need to. I was just happy he was there. And at that minute, from across the hall, from the hair and makeup room, out comes the star of the show, the first guest, Dana Delaney. And you remember, well, she's terrific anyway. She's such a terrific actress and always has been. And she's wearing, you remember how a lot of the really beautiful women used to do this? She's got a gown on. And I mean, it's a red gown. It was a nice red, a bright red, not a dark red. And went down to the floor. Her hem went down. I don't know a lot of these words, by the way. Maybe you can tell. But it went down to the floor, and she had some really nice shoes on, I think white shoes, and a string of pearls around her, the neck. But it was also the décolletage. That's what they call it, where you see, her shoulders, she's got the straps on, and they weren't thin. They were like thick straps. About an inch or two wide, and a space, all her skin of their chest there, and she's just been in makeup and with hair, and she walks over to us, to me and Johnny Carson, with a great smile, and says, "Well, hi, fellas. Well, doing," and we hadn't met, and she says, "Hi, good to see you," and I said, "Yeah, you too," and she said, "Hi, Johnny." And folks, she was so shatteringly pretty. And I mean, in a loony way. We all know, and I know that, sure, you expect to see beautiful women in Hollywood, but not this beautiful. I mean, this was nuts. And she was so easy to talk to and smile at. She had a great smile. I mean, the classic, I suppose it's a cliche, but the girl next door, a really pretty girl next door, admittedly, but I mean, she was so gorgeous and so well made up, and had such a beautiful figure and a great gown, luckiest gown in history. And I mean, and she was ready to go. And so we just talked for a couple of minutes, and she said, "Well, I might as well just finish up, go to the dressing room." She looked at me with just a great smile and said, "Have a good one." And I said, "You too." And then she turned to Johnny and smiled and said, "See you out there." And he smiled back, said, "Absolutely." And she walked away down the hall and popped in the dressing room door, her dressing room, which is about, I guess, 20 feet away. And as she did, and her door clicked shut, Johnny Carson and I were both just agog. And he turned to me and said, "Wow," in that great Johnny Carson voice. And it wasn't like, it wasn't some kind of tawdry sort of guys in a bar kind of, "Wow, boy, I'd like to kiss her," or something, or different words. It was nothing like that. It was just, we were both like two 15-year-olds. And when he said, wow, that Johnny Carson way of saying it, he was exactly right, number one. And boy, folks, it was quite a moment. And then he said to me, "All right, well, yeah, have a good one out there. We'll see you there." And we shook hands again, and he headed off to, go to work to start the show with that great thumping Doc Severinsen music behind him that you all know and you all remember. I hope you do. And I'll tell you what, I just stood in that doorway for another minute, just thinking, what in the world just happened there? And you can't just say, that's showbiz, even though, that's showbiz. And I just turned around and looked at my agents, and these are guys who know how to talk. That's what they do for a living. They talk on phones a lot and make jobs and do this and that. But even they just looked at me with their mouths open, just, same thing, just kind of, holy mackerel, that Johnny Carson had just come to my dressing room to say hello, followed by Dana Delaney. God bless her. I mean, a great actress, and holy mackerel. I mean, that's one of those You imagine God's going to just look down and say to you, well, how about that? You like that? Because I did that too. Well, folks, I know that was wonderful that night and that moment. But you and I both know that, and we know the same things. Homer is Homer, and Pluto is a planet. So remember, folks, as always, if you walked out of bed today and had a job to go to and a home to come back to, and someone there who cares about you, folks, the game's over and you've won. And that's still the truest thing I know. Dana, God bless you. Johnny, God bless you too. And folks, we'll see you here next time.